Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzales, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'm here with the Firearms Trainers Association to talk to you specifically as instructors about how to manage courses. As you move into this industry, there's going to be a lot of things that you are going to probably be experiencing for the first time. The first time you set up a course all on your own is the one in particular I want to talk about. Course management is something that I put a lot of effort into, because with so many courses being run in a year, you have to have a system, a process that allows you to make sure that you manage everything that you possibly can and you have little or as few balls dropping as possible. So the first thing that I talk about is you have to establish a very good relationship with the host. Whatever the host facility is, whether it's an indoor, outdoor range, whatever the case might be, you really have to start to establish a good rapport with them, because they're going to be your most valuable asset. They know the land, they know the customer base that's local there, they obviously know their facility and what you can and can't do. So once you have established that relationship, it's just going to make so many other things go well. The next big thing that I talk about is that you have to make sure that whatever the classes that you want to teach is appropriate for the range facility that you're going to be at. And that requires, again, dialogue with the host. For me, most of the time I do pistol rifle classes, so it's kind of easy. As long as it's a improved or even an unimproved range, it's going to have what I need. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to do as much work in advance as possible, so that you don't show up to a dirt berm and have nothing ready for the students. So the ultimate goal is to try to have the best experience for your students, because what you want is the student may not have a positive outcome from the class. In other words, they may not become the killer commando that they were hoping to during the class, but you want them to have a positive experience so that they'll want to come back. So once you start to get into that, the nitty-gritties, if you will, you have to start to think about like what is required to do that class that the range has, and what is required to do that class that the range does not. And then you have to start doing some number crunching. Is it reasonable for you to support the class through your own means by having material sent there, having it procured locally, whatever the case might be? But if this starts to get into cost analysis, is it reasonable for you to try to do this class, or are you going to lose so much of your profit because you have to do all this extra work to just make that particular range work for you? So you really have to kind of lay that down. The next thing that you have to do is you have to negotiate with them as far as what the range fee is going to be. The biggest mistake that you can make is not to appreciate the importance behind a range fee. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can have your range fee included in your registration fee, which is fine, and a lot of people do that. The student sometimes never even knows there's a range fee. Or you can have the range fee separate that you collect and then you just provide to the actual host. Or you can have the host collect the range fee on day one. Which method you use is really up to you. There's pros and cons to each. I typically don't like to use it rolled into my registration fee, because that's going to increase the cost. And we went through this issue several years ago, but what I came to the conclusion of was, for me, for management purposes, it was easier for us to not include that range fee, because many range fees from one facility to the next are different. And so now I was constantly adjusting my pricing model, which meant that some students that were going to come to a class that I did maybe in California see one price, whereas students that came to a class that I might have done in Texas see a different price. And now there's some confusion. Why are the prices different? Well, the prices are different because there's a difference in range fee, but the student probably doesn't know that. So to keep it simple, I typically use just a standard registration fee, and then range fee is separate from that. And that makes it easy for me. If you can find all the equipment that you need on site, that's great, but then you also have to coordinate with them as far as what type of target material and target array you have to work with. Are they portable target stands? Are they fixed target stands? You also need to make sure that you understand your backstop and the fields of fire, so that you make sure that everything that you're going to do falls within the safe parameters of the facility that you have to work with. When it comes to targets, you have a lot of targets to choose from these days. I really encourage you to find a target that supports the curriculum that you're trying to choose or trying to teach. If you don't have a favorite target, that's fine. Sometimes just using something as simple as a B-27 or even an NRA bullseye target work fine. If you do have a target in mind, one of my recommendations is to make sure that that target is going to support your objectives, and that means that you have to make sure that it can be useful for all the various drills that you're going to use. And the reason why I say that is because the best experience that a student can have is by understanding their progress. And that's mainly going to be derived from the targets themselves. So if a student is not able to see their progress through the targets, they're not going to know if they're getting better or not. So what happens a lot of times is somebody will shoot they'll shoot the crap out of a target without really changing that target. So the student really doesn't know if they're doing well or if they're not doing well. The next thing is taping targets. I strongly encourage you to tape targets, and there's two methods of taping targets. There's what's just basically taping all the target, or all the shots, or just taping the misses, and that's what I call a negative target taping. We use negative target taping because there's two reasons. Number one, it's going to encourage the shooter to make sure the shots are going inside the target zone. If it's a general drill and not a precision-based drill, it's fine. If, however, I need to be able to work on a precision based drill, that means that we're going to have to tape all the targets, and that's going to come into more logistics. That's going to be, do I have enough targets to supply that or support that, and do I have enough tape to support that? Those are the types of things that you have to really start to think about when it comes to your class, your cost analysis for the class. Other things that you need to start to think about are the actual layout of the range. From a safety point of view, you have to make sure that you have safe backstop, but then you also have to make sure that if you're going to be using various or multiple yard lines, that they're easily distinguishable and identifiable. The worst thing that you can have is some students that move to one yard line and other students move to another one. Obviously, you wouldn't commence fire until everybody's on the same yard line, but what you'll notice is that most of the time, students may not go to the right yard line. Then there's this delay as they reposition themselves on the correct yard line. And one of the things as an instructor that you have to be very cognizant of is time management. So if every time you move to the firing line, you're having to deal with that because the shooter's not sure what yard line they're standing on, then what that means is that every time you come to the firing line, you're adding time to just getting everybody safely on the firing line so that you can commence the drill, whatever that drill might be. So if they're easily identifiable, it's just going to make your life so much more easier. That may mean that you have to go out there and you have to identify them either with maybe some traffic cones, maybe spray paint some lines on the side, maybe they're already predetermined and they're pre-existing, and so that's easy. But those are the types of things that you need to have as part of the conversation with the host. The last thing that I talk about is a classroom. Is a classroom necessary? If a classroom is necessary, then you're going to want to make sure that it actually is a classroom, meaning that students can actually sit down, because the idea behind the classroom is that there's going to be a lecture or a brief, and most likely that's going to produce the desire to collect the information that you're giving them. So that means writing notes. So if it's a classroom setting where they can sit down and actually write notes, be in a comfortable setting where they can pay attention, and then you have all the various accoutrements that you need for teaching. That might be a whiteboard to draw on, maybe it's some sort of PowerPoint presentation with AV equipment. Whatever the case might be, you need to make sure that you have that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do a class just because you don't have a classroom. So there are some places that maybe it's better to use this facility which doesn't have the classroom, because the range facility is going to be much more supportive of what class you're trying to teach, in which case you need to be comfortable doing more of a field briefing is what I call them, which is where you gather everybody around, you go through and you kind of go through the lecture, if you will, in an impromptu manner. I typically discourage those from being too long, because a lot of times there's not the opportunity for people to collect notes in those scenarios. So you want to keep it short and sweet, and then hopefully be able to get out and do some sort of practical that reinforces whatever that lecture was that you were just talking about. In the end, the last thing that you want is some way to socialize as a class, and most of the time that's not done necessarily on the range, because when you're on the range, you typically want to be focused on the class. But it's still valuable to be able to get together with the student body to sit down and have a conversation with them. Most of the time that can be a lunch setting, or it can be maybe a class dinner at the very end. And the nice thing about being able to do that is it's an informal opportunity for students to get to know you better. There's the online personality that most people are aware of, but then there's the actual person themselves, the instructor themselves. And a lot of times there's a difference, or there's more to it. I like doing those types of evolutions where we can sit down as a class and have a nice meal and open up the discussion for different types of dialogue. Sometimes it's relevant to the class, other times it's not. Students have a typical, they're more interested in trying to talk at that moment than in a class setting, and you can get some good dialogue going about the class itself. You might also find that it just goes in directions that you didn't expect, which is good as well. And, it helps you to kind of, again, build rapport with the students, which is one of the reasons why it's valuable to do that. In the end, what you have to be able to do is you have to look at everything that I've talked about and associate that with the cost. What is that cost? Then you have to be able to make sure that your course fee can actually cover that cost and you still make some type of profit. Now that profit margin is going to be up to you. If you're starting out, that profit margin is probably going to be pretty low. It will take time for you to build up enough of a student base to where now you start to see profit on a more consistent basis. The key thing about this is that most people that get into this business are doing this as a labor of love, and they're passionate about helping other people. Keep that in mind when you start to see those classes where the profit margin is kind of low. Remind yourself that this is the reason why I'm doing it. I'm doing this because I want to help, I want to educate, I want to increase the opportunity for people to be able to learn about firearms. And then as you do it more and you do it well, now your reputation and brand builds, and as that builds, you start to see increased student participation, which means hopefully more profit. There's the flip side of this, which is you have to be able to know when to cut bait. It is unfortunate, but it happens. I hate to cancel classes, but if a class is not going to meet that minimum, it's not worth it. I don't want to necessarily pay out of pocket for a class, and I am disappointed that I had to cancel that class. But the other thing that goes along with that is, as instructors, we have to be encouraging to the student body, the potential student body, to register early. Just the other day I was participating in a conversation with another instructor who had to cancel a class. And it's unfortunate those happen, but they do. And the problem was that people were upset. Well, this is a business. And as a business, as a smart business, you have to make sure that you make smart choices. So if it doesn't benefit the instructor to do the class out of his own pocket, then it's probably reasonable to expect them to cancel it. Other things that you have to keep in mind is that sometimes the instructor has to also manage with the facility, and the facility has to be taken into consideration because they're hoping to get a range fee that's going to compensate them for the lost revenue that they're going to incur as a result of this class going on. A lot of times students don't take that into consideration. You go to a nice facility to train, that's great, that's awesome, but you need to realize that that nice facility comes with a price tag, and that means the instructor is paying a range fee or there's some sort of negotiated value behind that. And if the range is willing to take a hit on their revenue stream, that's their choice, but most of the time they're not, which means as an instructor you need to be able to make a good choice as to whether or not to push forward with the class or to go ahead and cancel the class and then have to deal with the disappointment of the registered student. So it happens. You need to have a plan in place to manage that, because one of the things that you don't want to do is push a bad position. You will find that the more you consider these various types of contingencies, the more likely you are to be prepared for them. And believe it or not, the more likely you are in that preparation of actually avoiding them in the first place. As a new instructor, there are a lot of things that you need to think about, and one of them, or I should say some of the mistakes that I've seen are just not paying attention to some of the detailed work that goes into setting up a class. So hopefully this video has been informative and helpful for you. If you have questions or comments, we look forward to hearing back from you. Make sure you post them or fire them off to us. I'm Jeff Gonzales, again, president of Trident Concepts, here with the FTA. Again, don't forget to protect the profession.